Well, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today. If you're involved with an ATS migration at all, you're in the right place. We've put together some pertinent information regarding PeopleSoft migration based on our experience helping our clients transition. So the name of the program is Migrating from PeopleSoft to Taleo, and my name is Ian Alexander. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Talemetry, and I'm joined today by Peter Clare, who is Talemetry Senior Vice President of Customer Success. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning.
All right, so we're going to jump right in here, but before we do, I want to let you know that the slides are going to be available. So you'll get an email within 24 hours after the presentation, and we'll have the slides for you there. So that's taken care of. And then finally, if you have any questions, feel free to just chat them into the question console for the webinar console. We'll either insert them into the conversation as appropriate, or we'll answer them at the end. But one way or another, we'll get to all of those. So let's jump in. We'll talk about the agenda here. So on the agenda, we're going to talk about some typical drivers for changing your ATS, some of the challenges we see our clients facing, and we're going to talk about what we call a combined migration approach. We'll go into the strategies that the combined migration approach supports, and of course the advantages and the advantages that we see it can have in the transition process, talk a little bit about telemetry, and go into the QA. So, Pete, I'm going to hand it over to you. Why don't you kick us off here?
Great. I think we're trying to take the approach of making sure that people understand what we're seeing from our customers, and I think this is a good summary of what we see from our customer base, of the typical reasons that they're interested in looking to migrate. I think, first of all, looking for a more flexible or scalable solution. There's a big push across the organizations that we work with to get everything into the cloud, particularly in the HR function. And then also looking at, the ability to move from point solutions that they might have outgrown and or have too many of into a real sort of ERP integrated solution. So we see those being kind of the top three reasons why a customer would look at a migration and going through the rigmarole of an ATS transition.
So yeah, and I want to jump in here too as well. When it comes to the question of why migrate, I just want to say we don't care what your motivation is or what system you want to move to. We frankly don't have a horse in that race. We can help you stay with your current ATS by adding capability around it, or we can help you transition to another one. But today, for this discussion, we're focused on migration.
Yeah, so from a migration perspective, I think the first thing that people think of in an applicant tracking migration is the internal operational impact, whether it's the internal operational impact to approvals, to the actual applicant tracking, as the name suggests, or the compliance considerations, whether it's EEO, affirmative action type of compliance. And I think across the board, all of the ATSs, particularly the Oracle ATSs, do a great job of those things. They also have functionality in lots of the areas that we cover in terms of recruitment marketing. But we think it's really important at the outset of making a migration decision to consider the entire view, and that means thinking start to finish of the candidate experience. So thinking about the first touch from your company all the way through to the point where they become a hire. I think the second piece is thinking about the recruiter's ability to go and proactively find talent effectively and really source from all the available candidate pools that they have. I think thinking about it from a marketing perspective of how do we drive the attraction and get some pull of those candidates in, and then how do we organize those candidates that have been pulled into effective pipelines to reduce the time to hire. So I think those pieces of the puzzle can have just as much of an impact in the decision making and the process as the approval type stuff, the traditional applicant tracking considerations and compliance considerations. And I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I think those considerations are probably more important today than they have been in a long time, with tightening access to candidate pools in terms of employment numbers going down, and sort of tightening supplies of qualified candidates, et cetera, that you don't want those particular features to kind of drop off the map as you're focused on migrating.
Yeah, completely agree. And the candidates just have a different expectation based on their use of the internet in general these days. So, great point. If you want to flip to the next slide. So when we look at, on an overall basis, what are all of the challenges that come out of a migration today? I think it starts with the fact that migration in these large companies takes a lot of time. It takes time not only from the recruiters, but also from IT resources, from marketing resources, approval processes, the procurement process even. And when we think about these projects, we can measure them sometimes in weeks and months, but also they go up to years, right? And what we've found is a lot of the folks that we work with are experts in recruiting. They're not necessarily experts in overall change management and process into their companies, as well as the external view of that. And what we've seen is there's typically an unexpected level of cross coordination that occurs in managing a transition from one ATS to the other. And we see really getting a clear understanding of what those time constraints are, what those resource constraints are up front has a real significant impact in how you build out your migration strategy. When you think about it, if you want to just pop to the next slide. When you think about those challenges in that timeline, there's some real potential issues around how do you build momentum and sustain that momentum through what can be a friction-filled change in operating process. So if you start getting into making changes to the system on a long-term scale and you don't have early wins, and it's going to be very difficult to maintain confidence, and it's going to be then coming out of a lack of confidence, it's going to be difficult to really pinpoint and highlight what the gains are from moving from one system to another over time. And then the other one, it seems like it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but we consistently see it in applicant tracking migrations, is the availability of the technical teams, whether they're called IT teams, HRIS teams, HRIT teams. Those people being available to manage the migration from one tool to another over a sustained period of time can be a real scheduling issue. So those are some of the things that you really need to think about when you're looking at a long-term transition of all of your operational processes, candidate experience, and other things. So specifically, why is that IT team piece important in getting the wins up front? I think because there's this idea of real technical mayhem that comes out. You've got job postings out to potentially hundreds of different job posting vendors. You've got candidate relationships that are being managed on an ongoing basis. There's literally, in many cases, dozens of third-party vendors outside of just job boards, whether it's data sources, background checkers, et cetera, through the process. There's evolution of technology requirements from a platform capabilities perspective, and then there's all the historical reporting and compliance challenges that come up and have a real technical impact into the process. And I think that's can't be overstated how big of a challenge it can be to manage all of those moving parts, particularly when you're coming at it from the perspective of a recruiter trying to get your job done every day, or you're coming at it from the perspective of a talent acquisition leader trying to move your organization forward in terms of their overall capability set supported by the tools, or if you're coming at it from the perspective of the IT person getting all of the other stakeholders to understand the complexities that you're dealing with. So I think, coming out of that technical mayhem piece, there's also the piece on the recruitment side, talent acquisition side, where there's often misaligned expectations, whether you're talking about the expected functionality at a recruiter level or a manager level, or the ability to support workflows that may have popped up organically in older systems, or the workflow and the challenge that is being solved in a different way in the new ATS. And I think some of those friction points that come up can really lead to a delay in the ROI that the company is going to experience from making the transition. And as those friction points come up again, and you have the potential to lose momentum, and it gets more and more difficult to deliver on a project. So keeping that in mind in the process, I think, is really, really important. So I think, on top of that, and probably most importantly, and that's why we kind of saved this for last in the overall migration challenges, is there's a real potential to miss candidate expectations. And I think anybody in the talent acquisition world can tell you at this stage that the worst possible thing you can do is miss set or not deliver on the candidate's expectations. And you think about how does that actually work? So it starts with the potentially thousands of jobs that you have linked out to websites like whether it's a LinkedIn job posting or Monster or others. As I think we all know, those then get scraped by hundreds of other job boards, and you have the potential for your first touch with a candidate seeing your job and applying on a job board where the job was scraped, and it ultimately leads to a dead link. Right, so that's a simple example of a very complicated problem that can occur if not thought through properly during the transition process. I think the second thing to think about is, as the recruiters are talking to a candidate during a transition process, do they have access to all of the candidate's information up to date so that, for example, you're not necessarily sending a marketing email or communication to somebody who's in the third step of a hiring process already, and thinking through those candidate experiences that during a fairly tenuous point in your relationship with a candidate can really derail things. So I think, as I said, we put this one last because it's probably the most important one to make sure that there's no missteps on, and to make sure that you're meeting and exceeding the candidate's expectation through the process. So with those key challenges in mind, I think that the thing to talk about is, so what's our migration approach? And I think in a lot of ways we tailor this to the individual customer situations that we're working on. But I think on an overall basis, the number one thing that we're trying to do is make sure that as you build out your migration approach, that we keep in mind the objective of increasing your pre-applicant capabilities before, during, and after the migration. You're preserving the candidate experience as well as the recruiter experience, and showing measurable gains in that process throughout. You're reducing disruption internally, and I think that comes from, as we've talked a little bit about, the recruiter workflow and the recruiter experience, as well as the marketing team's experience, as well as the IT team's experience through the process. You're making sure that you have an objective of not really requiring a hard cutover that can be really friction-filled process, and more able to manage a sustainable, less risky evolution type of approach. And I think making sure that you're lowering your migration costs and reducing technical risk in the process. So when we think about how that actually works, right? How would we do that with our system? If you take a starting point of having, let's say, PeopleSoft in place and a couple of different point solutions, one for searching candidates and one for posting jobs, for example, and then looking to a transition complete point of being up and running on the Taleo system with a full enhanced recruitment marketing solution like Talemetry delivered on top of it. The way we would see that really transitioning from step one all the way through the process is really starting with connecting up Telemetry's externally focused job distribution and career site solution to the PeopleSoft system, right? That's going to allow you to get the candidate experience up and running right away. Make sure that you're automatically posting all of your jobs out from your original system out to the various sources, so that not only is the candidate experience upgraded, but also you've now got a handle on and a stop in the return traffic coming from the job board, so that we can redirect that later on when we switch the ATS in the back end, eliminating those duplicate links. I think then looking at how do you provide the sourcing tools upgrade through the telemetry system, so that the recruiters are able to get at all of their different sources from a consolidated place, including the ability to source from the core applicant tracking data, right? And then in the third transition step, really looking at switching on the new ATS and starting to migrate over groupings of jobs or groupings of functional areas into the new ATS, with the ability then to be redirecting the applicants to the appropriate ATS, whether it's the new one for the ones that have been cut over, or the old ones for the ones that are still in process, without having any challenges with the external postings flowing through in the process. So yeah, that's one example, making sure that you then are able to kind of sunset your old ATS while increasing the usage of the new ATS and keeping all of the original data in a format that's available to the recruiters throughout the process and on an ongoing basis, eliminating a need to transfer data from one ATS to the other, because we've pulled it all into a repository from a sourcing perspective as well as from a compliance reporting perspective. So, this is a different graphical representation of what I talked about, where you're really looking at putting out the candidate experience, then looking at sourcing and CRM, and ultimately transitioning all of the applicant tracking. But so that's how you kind of see the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 here. But the diagram is really valuable to look at, because that's just one strategy. If you had a situation where the key thing that you needed to do first of all was look at the recruiter experience and deliver sourcing materials, because your internal buy-in and your internal wins are going to be most important, then this shows that really, with the jobs and candidate data being synchronized from both ATSs at all times, we have the ability to flip the script on what is the right flow for your company, based on the technical capability, really, to pick which pieces go in which order. So I think, if we look at the migration advantages that our customers have seen through the process, is that, with this type of an approach, it's possible to increase your candidate flow, make sure you're filling your pipelines, really at any stage in the migration process, regardless of which is the core ATS in the background, for which grouping of jobs. I think you have the ability, not necessarily to just reduce your candidate disruption or your recruiter disruption, but more importantly, make some strategic decisions about when you want to take that change on. So it's not just about reducing the disruption, but it's about when is the disruption. If you're thinking about, the college hiring system coming, or if you're, we work with a lot of retailers, for example. If you're coming into the fall, into the busy shopping season, you're probably not going to want to have huge disruption in your pipelines and in your flow. So being able to really make the strategic decisions about when is the right time, and not have the technology holding you up from making an evolutionary change there, is really important. I think because we manage and maintain integrations to hundreds of vendors in the process, and are able to just literally swap out the back-end integration, that really simplifies the migration requirements technically, significantly reduces the burden on the IT team, and allows for better scheduling in that area. And obviously that's just going to lead to a reduced cost in migrating, not only from an integration perspective, but also from a jobs candidate data perspective. So I think, on an overall basis, we think that the ability to really make sure that you're getting a complete recruitment marketing platform, as well as being able to analyze hiring results both pre and during and post migration is really important. I think reducing risk of a big bang, turn off one day, turn on the next type of a solution is really critical. Having the ability to synchronize your data into into the telemetry system and use that as a broker that's going to continue to live is critically important to reducing the overall risk. Managing the candidate experience, reducing dead links in the process is a significant advantage. And I think really just having the choice and the ability to go through a measured process of transition with the candidates and the recruiters and the technical integrations is the overall advantage that we bring to the table.
Yeah, Pete, and we have a question here, and I wanted to kind of wait on this question a little bit till we got a little bit more perspective here in terms of your presentation. But the question is, we were told if we have Oracle Taleo, we will no longer need telemetry, and Oracle Cloud has the functionality. Please confirm and explain. And I think this kind of gets down to, the previous message that you sent out there is really looking at each specific situation and looking at the ATS along with the pre-applicant stuff that you're doing, really understanding what pieces you do need and what pieces you don't need. But I wanted to get your perspective on that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been asked that. We've been asked that a lot of times, and I think that typically comes in the situation where somebody's just using our resume extraction technology, which we call Apply. And the core extraction technology definitely is embedded in the Taleo system. So when you look at that one small portion of what we do, that piece definitely is baked into the Taleo solution. I think, as I talked about earlier, the key considerations that we think about when we think about what telemetry can do is around the candidate experience, the sourcing capabilities, the attraction capabilities, or marketing capabilities, and the candidate pipelining. We believe that in those areas we provide a really supercharged experience for Taleo and provide a lot of capabilities that don't actually exist.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, there's going to be some areas of overlap in functionality, but really taking the time to look at this holistically and really understand the outcomes that you want to have both pre, during, and post migration really sort of puts you into a process where you get those answers up front prior to committing resources and making assumptions about functionality that they could come back and hurt you with early wins or make you kind of go back and need to sort of reevaluate things either mid or post migration.
Absolutely agree. And I think on an overall basis, really looking at that from a services supported staged approach, getting in, understanding what those migration challenges are, is definitely something that we'd love to talk about in context of whether telemetry is needed or not based on what the organization's business goals are. And I think looking at it again from that holistic perspective is probably the key takeaway from a conversation like this, rather than coming at it from a specific overlapping technology perspective.
Good. So I want to talk a little bit about who we are. We're going to wrap up here shortly. But a quick overview of Talemetry. We develop and support an industry-leading recruitment marketing platform, and that supports everything from job distribution to sourcing both internal and external candidates, candidate engagement, as well as career sites, application workflows, and full source to hire analytics that underpin all your recruitment, marketing, and candidate acquisition activities. We've been around since 2000. We've got hundreds of clients, many PeopleSoft clients within that, and a team of service pros with deep industry experience and knowledge. We're also an Oracle Gold Partner, and we have certified integrations across the Oracle platform, the Oracle HCM platform. So as you can see, we focus on enterprise level companies. As you can see down here, we've got 1 million active jobs. We've got 35 million candidates under management. We post 1 million jobs annually. So we understand what it takes both from a service and a scalability standpoint to really support those large and complex clients. So we got a couple more questions here. Pete, so how long does a typical transition take?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer. I think what we've seen is we've seen anywhere between 3 months and literally up to 1.5 to 2 years. We generally see 3 months is the timeline, sort of the minimum timeline expectation to delivering real business value through a proper transition plan. So what I'm saying there is, in a smaller company with less change management requirements, from a scale perspective, we can run the process start to finish in 90 days. In very large, global, complex organizations where it might take up to 2 years to manage the complete transition, it's not sort of start the project now and see a result in 2 years. It's more like on a kind of 90-day schedule, hitting key milestones that are not just technical project milestones, but actually business impacting milestones that we work with our customers to make sure that are being packaged properly and being used on an ongoing basis to engage both candidates and internal stakeholders.
Okay, and let's see. Is it more important to focus on the candidate experience first or the recruiter experience? And can you talk a little bit more about the recruiter experience?
Yeah, I think I think that also depends on the company. We see that if it's an environment where there is a high rate of turnover in the recruitment side, you might want to be focused really on the recruitment side and getting the processes set up effectively there. Particularly if you have a really strong employment brand already, if you're an employer of choice and destination of choice, it may not be required to go out and look at the candidate experience first, but it's really a more complex question than can be answered generically. I would just always go back to looking at it from the perspective of, okay, what's the most important thing to make sure that the right people are getting hired in the right timeline, and tailoring a migration approach based on that. Okay.
Can this approach be used for multiple ATSs to one?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So one of the key capabilities from a telemetry perspective is that we can put multiple ATSs together and manage a migration process. So we have experience, for example, globally taking a company with six or seven ATSs down to one as part of a big initiative they had to centralize, and that was a process that took about 2 years, during which time the candidate experience, of course, was most important to make sure that that was set up solid right from the beginning while they were doing a bunch of back-end changes. We've seen situations where there's even multiple Oracle systems by design for different countries, where we've consolidated or are consolidating the candidate experience on the front end as well as the sourcing experience to allow everybody to leverage the multiple assets without interrupting the operations. So yeah, the short answer is definitely.
Okay. And this is, what about switching from non-Oracle systems to Taleo?
Yeah, again, and that's kind of the situation that I referenced before, where we have the ability to manage this transition process from any ATS to any other one, and particularly with our integrations into the Oracle world, we're in a really strong position to help.
Great. So I think that's it on questions. We don't have any more coming in. So I want to thank everybody for coming. If you want to learn more about this, there's an address on the screen, and we'll also send you the slides as well. You can also reach out to me and I can get you more information about this and point you in the right direction. So you can visit us on telemetry.com or send an email. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Thank you, Peter, for your time, and want to wish you a great day. Go out and enjoy it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, everyone.